Now let's talk about placement. Well, what is placement? Well, placement is simply where your child is going to end up at. Now that your child's been found eligible, they've been identified, they've went through the evaluation process, been found eligible, and you're having an IEP meeting and you decide on what services your child may need. During that IEP meeting, and almost always during an IEP meeting, placement decisions are made, and they involve a number of things, including least restrictive environment and free appropriate public education, and we'll go through each one of those things, including the rules and regulations. But generally, it's the IEP team that decides, and really it shouldn't be called placement, it should be called placements, and let me explain that a little bit to you with a graph. What do I mean by a continuum of placements? Well, at one end of the graph you have special education setting. That would be whether your child is in the special education classroom 100% of the time. The other end of the spectrum down here would be a regular classroom setting. That is, that your child would be in the regular classroom 100% of the time. Now, they could be in special education 100% of the time, and they could be in regular classroom setting 100% of the time, but most often they'll fall in here someplace. And this is a continuum. So when you're in your IEP meeting, one thing to focus on is you're supposed to be offered more than one placement. So if you go to the IEP meeting and they say, we've already decided they're going to be in the classroom 80% of the time, and then they're going to be in a special education setting 20% of the time, and that's the way it is. That's not the way it is. It's for the team to discuss and decide where your child should be, where they can benefit the most from their education. One more thing about this continuum. Services are supposed to be geared so that your child ends up more towards the regular classroom than the special ed setting. And what I mean by that is the services that are put in place should move your child up in this area and try to keep your child out of this area. That's the goal, to keep your child, and that's what least restrictive environment is, to keep your child in the regular classroom as much as possible. So how do we do that? One of the things that help is related services, and related services are used to help your child benefit from their education. So let's say that your child needs a computer. Well, without a computer, he may be down here in the setting someplace here. But with a computer, he may be able to access the regular classroom more. Supplementary aids and services, those are services that are used to actually bring your child into the regular classroom more often. So let's say without an aid, let's say your child has behavior problems as an example, and they need to be in a special ed setting, but if they had a full-time aide that helped them, or a behavior management plan that helped them, they may be able to access the regular classroom more. So that's supplementary aids and services. Remember, related services helps your child benefit from their education. Supplementary aids and services helps your child be in the regular classroom. Related services and supplementary aids and services, as we said, help with the least restrictive environment, and the least restrictive environment is more towards the regular classroom setting. We want to move this direction as much as possible, and that's what a continuum of placements, that pretty much explains it. So now that we've discussed the continuum of placement, I want to let you know that your placement of your child is constantly going to change. That's why you discuss it once a year in the IEP meeting, and that's a requirement that it be discussed at least once a year. But it's going to change. It's going to change from elementary school. It's going to change as you get into junior high school and high school. And eventually, when you get to the transition period, then your placement really changes, because you're looking at school to work. And so you'll see the placement there be markedly different, a lot different from where it was before. The last thing, and we've covered this before, but when your child is placed, make sure they're doing well in their placement. If they're not doing well in their placement, contact your school and let them know. That's the key thing about placement. It should be someplace where they're advancing, not someplace where they're having difficulty.